2 days later, my wife came into the room and woke me up and said, "Hey, Keisha's awake and she's lucid and we should call Sean." So we called Sean. She's on Pacific time, so it's 4 o'clock in the morning.
I am excited for this one, everyone. I had the great opportunity to coach Bob throughout his amazing book that just came out. He's got a very powerful story to share, a why that is as large as anyone I've seen. And now we caught up behind the scenes. I learned he's scaling this a bit. He's got some people helping him grow it. So Bob Furniss, welcome to Writing with Authors.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. And of course, can't say enough for how much your help was in the coaching process.
Well, thank you, Bob. Well, today we're going to learn all about your process, what we did to put this book together. And I know Bob can share the story way better than I can. But first, let me welcome everyone to Writing with Authors, a YouTube show I created to help fellow writers out there get over that hump of getting it done, as well as adding a new book to everyone's book queue. Bob is streaming in from Memphis. I'm down here in Florida. And today we're talking about a project that was one of my more meaningful coaching assignments, as the story is so deep and he's turned a tragedy into something so beautiful. Bob, please share the story of your life, of what brought you here today to Writing with Authors.
So I have had a daughter, Keesha, who was diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer when she was just 30 years old. And the surprise of that, I was away at work on a work trip, and my wife called me, and she had taken Keesha to the emergency room. She had met Keesha at the emergency room, and the doctors, she was having some breathing problems. And at no point did anyone think cancer or think, especially at her age, it is unusual to have cancer at 30 years old. So that opened up a 4-year span where she was on 14 different regimens of drugs. She was just a warrior. And my little girl, who used to, when she would fall down, she would scream and cry, and I would go, "But I don't see anything, sweetheart. There's no blood. There's nothing." Became the strongest woman that I've ever known in my life. She was just a warrior, and I called her my princess before. I called her my warrior princess, and that is the name of our nonprofit, Warrior Princess. You can find us at warriorprincess.org to find out more about the organization. But her story was one that she lived out loud. And so I asked her multiple times, do you want me to help you tell your story? And her answer was always, please tell my story so that other parents don't go through what you're going through, and that other women don't go through what I'm going through. So I had her permission during the 4 years to help write about. We wrote about a lot of stuff on Facebook and shared it with friends. We had friends from all over the world following her story. And then the catalyst of the book became an article that I wrote. But it is a story that I felt like that I needed to tell, whether anybody read it or not. And I think as an author, that's probably the biggest piece. Is we all have stories. Do you have a story that you just need to tell? You need to get it in writing. You need to get it out. And that's what the catalyst was.
The book is going to help so many people, whether you're going through this yourself, alone, with someone else, a family member is. Bob has put his heart and soul into this book. We talk about Keesha's life in the beginning, of course, as a kid, and then we turn into her adulthood. Bob, what is one of your favorite Keesha-isms? And then tell everybody what a Keesha-ism is, because we have those sprinkled throughout the book.
A Keeshaism is something at the end of a chapter or a part of the book that I think it comes from me being so tied to business writing. It was like I wrote a story and I didn't have any takeaways, and so the Keishaisms are the takeaways, the learnings that she taught me as a father, and that she gave me in my life to help me live a better life. And one of her Keishaisms was that uh, there's nothing that I can, if I can't do something about something, then I need to accept it and move on. And Keisha was diagnosed with ADD, the ADHD without the hyperism. Uh, but when she was in elementary school, and it was a it was a big it was a big milestone for us as parents, because we didn't understand what she was going through. I can remember walking into her room and her having her sock in her hand, and me saying, "Put your socks and shoes on. Put your books in your book bag, and meet me in the car in 5 minutes. We got to go. We're going to be late." And I would come back 5 minutes later, and she's still standing there, sitting there with the sock in her hand, looking out the window. It was because I gave her too many things. She only needed one thing at a time, and she typically did one thing really well. And in the book, I talk about how that became her superpower, because she became focused on living, and that was her number one focus. It was her really her only focus. When she talked to doctors, she would ask, if this doesn't work, what's next? When she talked to friends and family, she didn't talk about dying, she talked about living. And we put things in front of her every 3 to 6 weeks. And so one of my favorite Keishaisms is, don't let the the things that you can't change impact the way you live. Live through those things.
Bob, the book is so inspirational. I know you're carrying on her legacy now through these Keishaisms. Everyone, stick around for just a few more minutes. We'll tell you where to find the book online. But if you are with us on the live stream or on the video version, you'll see we have ontobluebook.com and warriorprincess.org. Those are ways you can find more about the book, get more involved with Bob's mission. But Bob, shifting to some writing advice. What's one piece of writing advice you can offer our audience today from your experience now thriving with this new book?
Well, I first of all, and this is not a shameless plug for you, but I first of all believe that there's value in having somebody to help you from a coaching perspective. There's huge value in, no matter how much you believe you can write, there's value in having somebody that you can bounce things off of, that you can interact with and help you form a story. The other big thing for me was, should I write this book? And I just talked about, if you have a story, write the book, even if it's for you, even if it's for you and 3 other people. Don't be afraid to put what's in your heart and in your head on paper, and write the book. And then the third thing is be what's the word? Be subtle. Don't be afraid to adapt as you're writing the book. You're going to find stories that you write and you go, okay, that wasn't worth that. That probably is not going to make it in the book. So I had a plan of, whenever I would think of a good story, I would just sit down and write about it, and I would place it into the book, and then decide later whether it was going to fit into the book. So I didn't try to narrow down all of the stories and just write about the stories that I thought were book worthy. I wrote and then narrowed things down and took things out and found things. One of the I tell people the book was therapeutic in that it gave me the ability to think through things. And there were days that I would write for, my book is is filled with grief. So there were days that I would write for an hour and I would say, that's all I got in me. And then there were days that I would find a story that I forgot about, and her roller skating on playing basketball in the front yard, her roller skating, playing basketball and breaking her wrist. And it made me smile, and I would write for a couple of hours or 2 or 3 hours. So those are 2 or 3 things that I learned along the way that I'm not sure that I understood before I went through this process.
I appreciate you sharing that. I don't know the statistic, but of people that actually start a book and then finish the book. So I want to pat you on the back. You finished it. You rode with me right to the finish line. And of course, the book just expands and evolves. So everyone, your original idea of the book may not look much like the finished product. You have an idea of what you want, but if you're as dedicated as Bob was to the process, it's what you need to do to be just as successful with it. It's not something you can, I'll get to it. If you don't hold yourself accountable, it will never get published. And Bob did a great job at setting goals with me. And that's something that works for me in my own projects, the writing goals to get from point A to Z. Bob, before I get the info for where the book is, I'd love to talk about the title, right? We chose this title. It wasn't as easy as just picking one title and moving forward. Walk us through your brain of formulating the best title that portrayed your book the best way, because you have such a powerful message. The title's a big piece of it.
Yeah, I can share a couple of things that are unique about it, but the process was, which story tells her life the best? Which story fits her the best? And to your point you just made, when I started this book, in my mind, I was going to write a memoir about what it was like to be a dad and how much my kids had taught me throughout their life. And I've done some speaking in my life, and I had a presentation that was well received called 10 Things That My Kids Taught Me About Customer Service that I used to do. So in my mind, I started out in sort of that vein of writing a memoir about being a dad. It then morphed into a story that her stories became so powerful. I've still got stories in the book about my son and about my wife and about my family, but the stories focuses on her. And so On to Blue had to do. Are you asking me to tell the story of On to Blue? Okay, all right. I wasn't sure.
It's a great story, everyone, and it speaks to Keesha's character and all she was into.
So I told you about her ADD and her one thing, and Keesha, when she got sick, not too long after she got sick, she joined a team of retail of online sellers called Unique. It's a cosmetic company, and you have different levels. You make different money based on the amount of levels that you were. And Keesha had reached pink status, or I'm sorry, yellow status, and that was cool. That was better than the first 2 statuses, but then she reached pink status, and I thought that was just too perfect, that she was a pink status, because she loved doing videos. I've seen her sit in her chair from chemo and throw up for 10 minutes and wipe her mouth off and say, well, I got to go do a video for Unique. I'll be back in a little bit, because she lived with us while she was sick. But the On to Blue story was, she had gotten very, very ill, and we were at the end days, and we knew it, and the doctor knew it. And I got a call from one of her leaders who said that we want to do something special for Keesha. She wants to be pink status, which is the next status after yellow, so bad, and we realized that she's not going to make it. So we would like to ask all of the women on her team if they would be willing to attach their sales for a day to Keesha's number so that she could get credit for it and reach pink status, which in itself is an amazing story. If I stopped there and told you that a bunch of women who live and breathe by their sales online decided to give all of their sales for a day to somebody else on their team, you understand that Unique was, and as I understand it is, more about empowering women than it is about selling just selling cosmetics. But so I said, of course, and that's cool. And so she called me back about a week later, and she goes, Bob, she made it to pink, and I'd love to tell her that. And I said, well, Sean, she has become so sick. She's not lucid very often. She was sleeping about 20 hours a day and was just very ill. And she said, well, call me anytime that she wakes up and I can tell her. And so at 6:00 in the morning, 2 days later, my wife came into the room and woke me up and said, hey, Keisha's awake and she's lucid and we should call Sean. So we called Sean. She's on Pacific time, so it's 4:00 in the morning. She answered the phone. Hello, Bob. And I said, hey, Sean, she's awake if you want to tell her. She goes, sure, put us on Facebook. So she put him on FaceTime. So we put her on FaceTime. She told Keesha laying in her bed or sitting up in her bed, lit up like a Christmas tree or like the 4th of July. She was so happy to be pink. And they talked for a while about what that meant. And they talked about the business. And then it was time to end the phone call. And Keesha said, okay, well, on to blue. And I didn't understand what it meant. So as I walked out of her bedroom, I was on the phone with Sean and I said, what did she mean by on to blue, Sean? And she goes, Bob, blue is the next level. She's already thinking about what she's going to do next. And to me, that story just epitomized the fact that she was such a warrior and she was so much planning to live, not planning to die. And as I began to play around with that as the title, I remembered that she loved the ocean. So on the front of the book is a girl flying a kite on the ocean with the blue water. And of course, we have expectations that we're going to see her again in heaven. And so the blue of heaven, the blue of the sky, the blue of the ocean, and more importantly, her attitude that blue was going to take her to the next level.
Bob, thank you for sharing her story. Thank you for coming on here today. I couldn't help but smile as the parts of that story because I've heard that story before and I know how happy that made her. That phone call where that future-oriented mindset, yep, okay, next up, blue, cool. How am I going to get to blue?
So, exactly.
Oh, absolutely inspirational, Bob. I want to thank you so much for taking some time to join us here on Writing with Authors. Everyone, he'll be on our longer shows. He'll be on a mental health break. He'll be on that entrepreneur show. So buckle up to learn about his story in new ways coming soon. Bob, other than warriorprincess.org and ontoblue.com, where can we find the book and where can we find more about you?
You can find the book on Amazon. If you look up On to Blue book, Bob Furniss, it will come up. Interesting as an author who works with Amazon for the first time. You have to get the SEO has to catch up with On to Blue. So I went in the day it launched and typed in On to Blue, and I went, well, I don't want a blue pot, and I don't want a book about blue birds. I want On to Blue by Bob Furniss.
Yep.
So if you search on to Blue book, Bob Furniss, it will come up, and it's available in all 4 categories on Amazon. So that was another learning that I found. It's been interesting working with Amazon and working with the team to learn all the nuances of Amazon and the different ways that books are published.
Oh my gosh, Amazon is so hard to work with sometimes that no one understands that till you do the book. I'm on like my 7th or 8th solo book with them. And my last book, still, this number of books, I couldn't get it out on time. The whole thing was messed up. It was like 2 months delayed because the title it was a whole nightmare. So everyone support his book. I got his name if you're watching the video today, Bob Furniss. You can spell it, type it in there onto blue. I'll throw it up one more time there on the bottom. Everyone, this is Writing with Authors. Bob?
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Of course. And everyone, please stick around, subscribe for the next episodes. I try to get right to the point, not waste anyone's time on Writing with Authors. We dive into the book. We get some writing tips. And now, of course, you can get your copy on Amazon, onto bluebook.com, and check out warriorprincess.org to learn more about Keesha's mission. And Bob, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.